Welcome to our March 2025 Abbeville Institute Zoom webinar. We're excited to be here again tonight, and it's been about a month since we were on last, and we have a very special guest tonight. He is Paul Graham, one of the founders of Shotwell Publishing, which everybody should know about. It's a great publishing house there in Columbia, South Carolina. The other, of course, less conspicuous individual involved in that is Clyde Wilson, some guy named Clyde Wilson. So if you want to get some great Southern books, I highly recommend Shotwell Publishing, and I'm just saying that to be funny. Clyde, of course, is great, and it's a very worthwhile endeavor. Paul also has a master's degree from University of South Carolina. We were talking about that, commiserating about USC before we came on here. So it's a grand time many, many years ago. But we've got a really great topic tonight, When the Yankees Come, which is a book that Paul actually, I think you gave us some of that material to put on the website when you were writing.
When I first did the South Carolina narratives, and I'll explain why I did it in the speech. I didn't know what to do with it, so I sent it to you, and you said this is great, and then put it up. So we didn't have Shotwell didn't have a lot to publish, and so that was just one thing that Clyde said we could put together pretty easily.
Right.
And so it was one of our first 2, 3, 4 books. But I did a second edition, Blam, and that one has South Carolina and North Carolina accounts. So I call it the same title, When the Yankees Come, but Sherman's March from the Sea, because it goes all the way into North Carolina.
Right. And it's a fantastic book. And of course, he's written other books too, Confederophobia, Lincoln on Stilts. I mean, these are worthwhile titles to get from Shotwell Publishing, along with many other things. So highly recommend it. And of course, as far as the Abbeville Institute, if you like what we do here, don't forget we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So go ahead and give us a donation at abbevilleinstitute.org if you want to see more of these things and more programs. So we do appreciate all your support. So we're going to turn it over to Paul. If you want to ask a question, make sure you use that little Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen, or you can put it over in the chat window and I can get it that way, but we will take questions. So Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Brian, Dr. McClanahan, for inviting me, and for the Institute for having me. This is a big deal to me, and I've been kind of nervous about it, but I know that I've been looking at the material, I've been practicing, so I'll probably do all right. As I said earlier, the remarks this evening are going to come from the second edition that I did of When the Yankees Come, Former South Carolina Slaves Remember Sherman's March from the Sea. All the ink gets thrown on his march to the sea, which is his march through Georgia to Savannah. But this is going to cover what the experts call the Carolina campaigns, which doesn't quite do the justice to what happened. So I heard someone call it Sherman's March from the Sea, so I grabbed it. James Kibler used it in a speech one time. So anyway, I thank you for having me. My initial inspiration for the topic was during the sesquicentennial of the burning of Columbia. I am a native Columbian, and there's not very many of us. And but during the event, it was strange. It was a very strange event. It was February of 2015. It was before June of 2015, July, when all the stuff down at the State House happened. So it was just a weird kind of time, and a lot of the things that were going on really had nothing to do with the burning of Columbia, as you might imagine. The commemoration, talked a little bit about the event. Of course, people like Tom Elmore and other people who were good on the burning of Columbia knew a lot of stuff about it. Had some stuff going on, but it largely turned into be a forum on race relations, civil rights, and things like that. And slavery, of course, which is one of the reasons that this thing came about. But I was hoping that Columbia would commemorate it properly, at least read some accounts, but they didn't. And there's a reason for that. Columbia does not want to be Columbia. I was looking at their website years ago, and I looked at it today, and it's still the same. Uh, on their official website, the City of Columbia has a small history, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and apparently nothing happened in the city worth noting between 1850 and 1870. So take that for what take that for what you can. Uh, there was no war, there's no Reconstruction, just nothing. Okay. As I said, I'm a native Colombian, but I grew up not knowing anything about the city being burnt down. I knew absolutely nothing about it. I had been to public schools, K through 12 in Columbia. Uh, I even went to undergraduate and graduate school in Columbia, and it wasn't until I was in graduate school that someone introduced me to William Gilmore Simms' Sack and Destruction of Columbia, which was my first taste of this, and it became a topic of immense interest because it seems like if a city burns down, that's something I don't know about. Um, of course, we went on field trips to the State House, and they told us about the stars on the side of the State House where Yankee cannons had hit. And they showed us where the statue of George Washington, he was holding a cane, but the cane is broken in half because a Yankee brickbat broke it off. So I knew a few things, but no one had ever told me about the burning of Columbia. So it became a topic of immense interest to me. Uh, so back to the commemoration, because there was such an interest in slavery during the commemoration, I thought it would be interesting exercise to explore what actual people who had actually been there and had actually been slaves had to say about their actual experiences with the Yankees. Um, Pretty simple idea. I knew if I trotted out Confederate friendly sources, they would not. They would never make it through the. No, I was just trying to get around. I was trying to do an end around by using the slaves narratives, which is the source for my material. The slave narratives of folk history of slavery in the United States, and it was. If you don't know what it is one of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt's many New Deal projects. Perhaps this was the genesis of the government thinking that it has a mission to make jobs. I'm not sure. But let me tell you a little bit about the scope of the work, because there are books all over the place that call itself the slave narratives. But unless it's pretty hefty, it is not the slave narratives. The scope of this thing is 17 states. Each state had their own reporting. 10,000 type pages and over 2,000 interviews for the whole thing. It's organized by state, and the interviews are organized alphabetically. South Carolina, for example, takes up 4 volumes. North Carolina takes up 2, so it's not a small thing. And these interviews took place between 1936 and 1937. So ideally, it would have been better if they'd interviewed them earlier and if they'd had more, but this is what we have, and we're lucky to have it. So let me tell you a little bit about the stats, and then we'll go right into the material, because that's really what you want here anyway. How I got there is almost irrelevant. Okay, so here's the stats that I came up with South Carolina, and this is just me with the tick mark. I'm not a statistician or anything, just counting how many of these things happen. So, SC stats relating to Sherman's invasion. Of the 285 South Carolina accounts, 40% have something to say about their interaction with the Yankee troops. Not bad, considering it didn't affect the whole city, but the whole state, but just a swath pretty much through the middle of it. Of these, 38% report theft, 11% reported vandalism, and by vandalism I mean the purposeful destruction of property that didn't terminate in arson. So I wanted to classify it as a different thing. 38% reported arson, and 9% reported the slaughter of livestock or the destruction of foodstuffs that were neither taken nor eaten by the invading army, and if it was not edible to those left behind. So that was a thing. The North Carolina stats are interesting because they're almost upside down. in a certain respect. There was far more theft and killing of livestock there. 71 of the total accounts of 176 talk about the interaction with the Yankees. And 46 of these, 46% reported theft, 12% reported vandalism, 6%, reported arson. They were out of matches or something. I don't know what happened. But 22% reported the killing of livestock and the destruction of foodstuffs, once again, that were neither consumed nor taken to be consumed and could not be eaten by those left behind. That's 6% in South Carolina and 22% in North Carolina. Maybe they had plenty of food. I know that Sherman had a wagon train of food that he never told anybody about. So the way that the narratives are written, there's an interviewer, and the response from the former slaves is in dialect. It is written the way they spoke, which is not a big problem for me and a lot of other Southern people, but it would be a big problem for someone who was not familiar with dialect. So to overcome that problem and make the material accessible to a larger audience, I simply went through and changed the spelling of the words. I didn't change what they said. The words that I'm going to give you tonight, straight out of the narratives, are exactly the same words that they used. I just changed the spelling. So if it had D, I put thee. If it had them, I put them. So that, you know, I didn't change the grammar or the usage or any of that. I only changed the spelling because I didn't think it was my business to in any way edit or audit what they had to say. And I didn't. I went through methodically through both all 6 of these volumes and found every passage, whether it was one sentence or 2 pages, that dealt with the interaction of the former slaves with the invading army. And this is what we're going to come up with. That's what we're going to listen to tonight. I'm going to read you several great ones, and I've got some that are my favorite that I'll read, and I have some that are, well, you'll see. Here's an epigraph to the South Carolina narratives that I'd start with, and then we'll go into some actual narratives. This is a quote. You think the people of Georgia are faring badly, and they are, but God pity the people of South Carolina when the army gets here, for we have orders to lay everything in ashes, not just leave a green thing in the state for man or beast. The state will be made to feel the fearful sin of secession before our army gets through with it. Here our soldiers were held in check, and they will get to South Carolina. They will be turned loose to follow their own inclinations. And this is reported an unnamed officer to Norma N. Canning in 1865, in a collection of women, Southern women in the war, edited by Jones, which she has a lot of good stuff. I forget her first name. So let's get into the narratives. Everybody okay? Yeah. All right. This is Mr. Lewis Evans. He lives near Winsboro. He lived near Winsboro, Fairfield County, South Carolina. He was 96 years old when he wrote this. Once again, I'm reading exactly what they said. That's your trigger warning. The Yankees come. The first thing they looked for was money. They put a pistol right in my forehead and said, I got to have your money. Where is it? There was a gal, Caroline, who had some money. They took it away from her. They took the geese, the chicken, and all that was worth taking off the place, stripped it, took all the meat out of the smokehouse, corn out of the crib, cows out of the pasture, burnt the gin house and cotton, and they shot some cows and pigs and left them lying right there. There was an awful smell around there for weeks after. Now, I don't know if you guys know what a barn burning does or a smokehouse being done implies, but that's all of your food storage. is in or in those two places. So if those things go up in smoke, whatever you have in the house is all you got if they left it. So glory, glory, hallelujah. Here's a short one. This is from Amos Gadsden, Charleston. He was 88 years old. Sherman set fire everywhere he went, didn't do much fighting, just wanted to destroy as he went. Yeah, pretty basic. That's all this guy had to say. Some people have more to say. Fanny Griffin had more to say. She's from Columbia, Richland County, South Carolina, is 94 years old during this interview. The worst time we had was when the Yankees come through. We had heard they was coming, and the missus told us to put a big pot of peas to cook. So we put on some white peas in a big pot and put the whole ham in it so that we'd have plenty for the Yankees to eat. When they come, they kicked over the pot, and the peas went one way and the ham went another. The Yankees destroyed almost everything we had. They come in the house and told the missus to give them her money and jewels. They started crying and told them that she ain't got no money nor jewels excepting the ring she had on her finger. They got awfully mad and started destroying everything. They took the cows and horses, burnt the gin, the barn, and all the houses except the one the masters and missus was living in. They didn't leave us a single thing except some big hominy and 2 banks of sweet potatoes. We chipped up some sweet potatoes and dried them in the sun. Then we parched them and ground them up, and that's what we had to use for coffee. It tastes pretty good too. Good. For a good while, we lived on just hominy and coffee. So they were helping folks out. Miss Jackson, Adeline Jackson, Winsboro. Short one. The Yankees that I remember was not gentlefolks. They stole everything they could and take the meanest things I ever seen was shoats they half killed, or cut off the hams and left the other parts quivering on the ground. Everybody getting excited. And it's awful stuff. Henry D. Jenkins, 87, Fairfield County, Winsboro. When the Yankees come, what did they do? They did them things they ought not to have done and left those things undone that they ought to have done. He must be a prayer book man. Yes, that's about tells it. One thing you might like to hear: Mistress got all the money, the silver, the gold, and the jewels, and got the well digger to hide them in the bottom of the well. Them Yankees smart. When they got there, they asked for the very things at the bottom of the well. The mistress wouldn't tell. They had a court of inquiry in the yard, called each slave up one by one, a good many of them. Must have been a Judas among us. Soon a Yankee was let down the well, and all that money, silver, gold, jewelry, watches, rings, brooches, knives, forks, butter dishes, water goblets, and cups was took and carried away by an army that seemed more concerned about stealing than they were about the holy war for the liberation of the poor African slave people. They took off the horses, sheep, cows, chicken, and geese, took the seine and the fishes they caught, corn in the crib, meat in the smokehouse, everything Master General Sherman said war was hell, and it sure was. Maybe it was hell for some of them Yankees when they come to die and give an account of the deeds they did in Sumter and Richland County. So, yeah. They probably did. I'd like to think they did. All right. I'm going to skip over a few. This is Andy Marion, age 92. What did the Yankees do when they come? They tied me up by my 2 thumbs and made me tell where I hid the money and gold, watch and silver, but I swore I didn't know. Did I hide it? Yes. So good, it was 2 years before I could find it again. I put everything in a keg, went into the woods, spaded the dirt by a pine stump, and put the keg in, covered it up. with leaves and left it. So he hid it all right, but they did find it. Mary Woodard, this is one of my favorites. When the Yankees come, you see where I get my title from? They all say it, right? When the Yankees come, I was sitting on the swing in the front yard. They ride right up and said, "Where's your missus?" I said, "I don't know." They said, "You're lying. Give her a few lashes and us will find out." Another says, "No, we come to free niggers, not to whip them." Then they asked me to tell them where the best things was hid. I said, "I don't know, sir." Then they ransack the house, bust open the smokehouse, take the meat, ham, shoulders, molasses, barrel sugar, and meal and put them in a 4-horse wagon, set the house, the gin house, and the barn afire, and go on to Rocky Mountain. I forgot to tell you that when the Yankees come and find me sitting in that swing, I had on a string of beads that Miss Nellie gave to me. Them rascals took my beads off my neck, and what you reckon they did with them? Well, if you doesn't know, I does. The scamps, that is one of them did, took my lovely beads and put them around his horse's neck and ride off with them, leaving me sobbing my life out in that swing. They say you must love your enemies and pray for them that despitefully use you. But I have never prayed for those Yankee scamps to this day. Although I is Scotch, Irish, African Associate Reformed Presbyterian, the Spirit never moved me to pray for the horse or the rider when went off of my beads that my mistress gave me. When I tell Mr. William Woodard, my husband's old master, about it, he says, "The low, dirty skunk, the Lord will take vengeance on him." So I like that one. All right, so we're going to move into North Carolina because we're at 19 minutes already. For North Carolina, we have had a hard time where we sweep the country like a swarm of locusts. Thousands of people may perish, but they now realize that war means something else other than vainglory and boasting. That's a quote by General Sherman. So he was planning some good stuff up there too. This is Ida Atkins, and she resided in Durham County, North Carolina. The North Carolina narratives aren't as good with the ages, but this lady was 79. I was born before the war. I was about 8 years old when the Yankee men's come through. Master Frank didn't go to the war. He was too old. So when the Yankees came through, they found him at home. When Master Frank seen the blue coats coming down the road, he run and got his gun. The Yankees was on horses. I ain't never seen so many men. They was thick as hornets coming down the road in a cloud of dust. They come up to the house, tied their horses to the palings around the yard. And when they seen Master Frank standing on the porch with the gun leveled on them, they got mad. Time Master Frank done shot one time, a bully Yankee snatched the gun away from him, told Master Frank to hold up his hands. They tied his hands and pushed him down on the floor beside the house and told him if he moved, they would shoot him. Then they went into the house. I was scared about to death, but I run to the kitchen and got a butcher knife. And when the Yankees wasn't looking, I tried to cut the rope off Master Frank's cut the rope and set Master Frank free. Sorry about that. But one of them blue devils seen me coming. He said, "What are you doing, you black brat, you stinking little alligator bait?" He snatched the knife from my hand and told me to stick out my tongue. He was going to cut it off. I let out a yell and ran behind the house. Some of the Yankees was in the smokehouse getting meat. Some of them was in the stables getting the horses. Some of them was in the house getting silver and things. I seen them put big silver pitchers and a teapot in a bag. Then they took knives and forks and all the candlesticks and platters off the sideboard. They went to the parlor and got the gold clock that was Miss Mary Jane's grandmammy's. Then they got all the jewelry out of Miss Mary's box. Then they went up to Miss Mary Jane And while she looked at them with her black eyes snapping, they thought they took off the rings off of her fingers. Then they took her gold bracelet and even took the ruby earrings out of her ears and the gold comb out of her hair. I done quit peeping around the window and was standing beside the house when the Yankees come out in the yard with all the stuff they was toting off. Master Frank was still sitting on the front porch with his hands tied. I could do nothing. About that time, I see the bee gums on the side yard. There was a whole line of gums. Little as I was, I had a notion. I run and got me a long stick and turned over every one of them bee gums. Then I stirred them bees up with the stick till they was so mad I could smell the poison. And bees, you ain't never seen the likes of these bees. They was swarming all over the place. They sailed into them Yankees like bullets, each one madder than the other. Then they lit on the horses until they looked like they were alive with varmints. The horses broke the bridles and tore down the palings and lit down the road, but their running wasn't nothing to what the Yankees done. They bust out cussing, but what does a bee care about a cuss word? They lit on them blue coats, and every time they lit, they stuck a poison sting. The Yankees forgot all about the meat and things they done stolen. They took off down the road, passing the horses, the bees right after them in a long line. They zoom and zip and zip and zoom, and every time they got a Yankee, he would yell. When they'd gone, Miss Mary Jane untied Master Frank. They took all the silver meat and things that the Yankees left behind and buried it so they couldn't come back and find it. That day, Ma called and said, Ida Lee, if you hadn't turned over them big gums, the Yankees would have toted off near everything fine we got. We want to give you something so you can keep and always remember this day and how you run the Yankees away. Miss Mary then took off a plain gold ring off of her finger and put it on mine. I've been wearing it ever since. That's a nice one. Bees. I mean, you got to use what you got. All right, one more, and that's it. And this is from Hector Hamilton, and I like this one because General Lee wins. The other General Lee. All right, y'all ready for this? I love this one. Hector Hamilton. Location was unrecorded, but he was 90 years old. There was two General Lees in the Confederate War. One lost his fight, but the other won his. One of the generals was a white man that rode on a white horse. The other was a mean fighting gander that I named General Lee, though I did not know at the time that he was going to live up to his name. But when the time come, that long-necked gander outfight the whole Confederate army. After the men's all went to war, there weren't no use for no more drams, so Miss Laura took me away from the sideboard and made me a watchman. That is, I was set to watch the commissary to see that the folks wasn't given no more than their share of eats. Then I looked after the chickens and things because patrollers was around the country and they'd steal everything from chickens to sweet potatoes to corn, and then they'd sell them to the Yankees. Everywhere I went around the place, the gander was right at my heels. He was the biggest gander I ever seen. He weighed about 40 pounds, and his wings from tip to tip was about 2 yards. Lost my place. Okay. I teached him to drive the cows and sheep, and I sicked him on the dogs when they got obstreperous, which is a pretty big word, huh? I teach him to drive the cows and sheep. Okay. I'd say sick him, General Lee, and that gander would change. He was a better fighter than the dogs. He'd fight with his wings, his bill, and with his feet. I seen him scare a bull near half to death one day. The bull got mad and jumped out of the fence, and all the niggers ran to the cabin, so I called General Lee and said, sick him on that bull. That bull gave one squawk. That bird gave one squawk and lit on the bull's back. You never seen such carrying on. The bull reared and snorted and kicked. That gander held on. He whooped that bull with his wings until he was glad to go back. into the lot and behave himself. After all that, all I had to do to that bull was show him General Lee and he'd quiet down. Now I'm going to tell you about Miss Laura's diamond earrings. The first Yankees that come to the house was gentlemen's, except they made us niggers cook their supper. They shined their muddy boots. Then they stole everything they found to tote away. But the next one that comes was mean. They got mad because the first Yankees done got all the pickings of what Miss Laura hadn't hid. They opened the feather beds looking for silver, ripped open the chair cushions looking for money, even tore up the carpets. They didn't find nothing because all the valuables had been buried. Even most of the wine had been hid. It was buried in the old graveyard down by the family, down in the old grave down by the family graveyard with tombstones at the head and foot. No Yankee ain't going to go digging in a grave for nothing. There was one Yankee in this last bunch that was big and bustling. He was biggity with his chest stuck out. He walked around sticking his sword in chair cushions and pictures on the wall and things like that. He got powerful mad because he could find nothing. Then he looked out the window and seen Miss Laura. She was standing on the porch and the sun was shining on the diamond earrings in her ear. They was earrings that belonged to Master Pete's great-great-grandmammy, excuse me. The soldiers seen the diamonds and his eyes began to shine. He went on the porch and went up to Miss Laura and says, "Give me them earrings." He says just like that. Miss Laura flung her hands up to her ears and run out in the yard. The soldier followed and all the other soldiers came too. The big Yankee told Miss Laura again to give him the earrings, but she shook her head. I was standing beside the house, near about bursting with madness, when the Yankees reach up and snatch Miss Laura's hands down and hold them in theirs. Then he laughed, and all the other soldiers began to laugh, just like they thought 'twas funny. About that time, old General Lee done smelled a fight. He came waddling around the house, his tail feathers bristled out, and taking to himself, I pointed to the soldiers and say, "Sick 'em, General Lee, sick 'em." That gander ain't waste no time. He let his wings and charged them Yankees. They scattered like flies. Then he lit upon that big soldier's back and began to beat him with his wings. That man yelled out quite a yell and dropped Miss Laura's hands. He had tried to shake that goose, but General Lee bit into his neck and held on like a leech. When the other soldiers come up and try to pull him off, that gander let out a wing and near slapped down. I ain't never seen such fighting. Every time I holler, "Sick 'em, General Lee," he would start another attack. About that time, the Yankees took off to running. They forgot the earrings and lit out down the road, but the gander beat the biggity yelling soldier clear down to the branch before he turned him loose. Then he jumped in the water and washed himself off. Yes, sir, that was sure some fighting goose. He near about outfight the sure enough Master General Lee. So that's a taste of sort of things that are in there. And by way of conclusion, you know, I mean, these few that I've done should give you a little taste of what's available out there. And, I just picked the ones out that I like the best, but there are many more in there. They were not all cruel acts. Some of the Yankees did provide some food to the slaves left behind, but of course that was only enough for whatever they could put up, which wasn't much. And there's a lot more firsthand accounts besides these. I just chose these because I thought that it would be a good way to talk about the burning of the city without using any Confederate sources. And so I guess that's what I've got. I could talk more about it, but I think what you see that what's fascinating to me is the humanity of the people involved come out more clearly than the abstraction that you might get in a survey course or something like that. All slaves went through this, or all slaves went through that. Human relationships are complex, and they flourish even in the most strange places. Of course, the slaves that were interviewed wanted to be free, but they also wanted to know how they were going to eat. And because there were no plans made for their well-being, except for Abraham Lincoln's ongoing quest to deport them, which was in his plans all the way to the end, which may explain why it was done so poorly. Uh, when one person starves in that community, everybody starves. When the food's gone, the food's gone. And I'd like to be free from my job, but not if I have to go looking for groceries and walk around the streets, uh, and not have a means of protecting myself and my family or feeding them or housing them or anything else. So it's a very complex situation and a very traumatic experience for them and everyone else because, quite, black and white Southerners both suffered in the same way. And if people knew that, maybe it would help things a little bit. Maybe not, maybe the narrative that they're shopping would suffer a little bit and we can improve relationships the proper way between those that are appear to be against the Southern tradition and those that of us who are. So there you have it.
Excellent. I mean, I think that the great thing about this book is, like you said, it brings up the humanity of the entire situation.
Yes.
These we talked before you came on the phone, and you had looked at some of the other narratives. Of course, they're out there for all these states, and you said there really wasn't as much in the other states in regard to this as
Yeah.
you would have in the Carolinas.
Right. Because I was looking only for specific instances. It was a very tight, condensed survey looking for one thing. But Georgia didn't have, I think it probably depended on where the interviewers were and who the people were that they interviewed. There were not scads of people that were interviewed. There was a lot, uh, but Georgia didn't have enough for me to do a Sherman's March to the Sea. But of course, they're all uh, they all have things to say, the good, bad, and ugly, which is the way you would expect human beings to interact with each other. There are good people, there are bad people, there are people that treated their servants well. There are people that treated them horribly. I mean, the full spectrum is there on display of whole humanity from the point of view of those who had been enslaved in Africa and sold in America.
Yeah, and it's we were talking again before we came on about a book I'm reading on Henry L. Benning, and I'm going to write something about that for the website here in probably a couple days. But Columbia wasn't the only city burned down. Of course, Columbus,
Oh no.
Georgia. We just had our conference in February. It was also burned, and there
Yes.
was some discussion about that in the book and what people were doing. Same situation, right? Linwood Cemetery, where Henry Benning is now buried. The families were
Mhm.
taking their valuables and burying the stuff in Linwood Cemetery because they
Yeah, I
knew.
mean that the one guy that said they wouldn't go dig up graves was wrong. They did dig up graves. They dug up a lot of graves.
Yeah, and of course, everything in the city, not just in the city of Columbus, Georgia, was burned. Anything that
Yeah.
was useful, they burned everything. Also looted, but they also went in the surrounding countryside. And a lot of these slaves are in areas, former slaves are in areas that were also in the country, not just in Columbia.
Yeah,
But
I
they're
mean,
going out.
these accounts mostly take place outside of Columbia.
Right.
There's a few that are in Richland County, but he burnt everything to Savannah, and he burnt everything on his way through the state. So I don't know why there's any question about whether or not he burnt Columbia, which they put in the newspaper every year that they don't know who burned it. Everybody who
Well,
was there
they have
knew
a
it.
they have a
it,
statue now for Sherman right there at the Congaree. There's a
it
statue
was the
of Sherman.
liquor that did it,
Yeah.
or something. Something did it, but it wasn't. It's like war is hell. Well, what is war? War is other hell is other people. Huh? Yeah,
Right.
depends on who
And
they
so
are.
there was a question about the accuracy of these narratives. Anytime they're brought up, it's always said, well, these things were written during the 1930s, height of Jim Crow. Nobody's going to be honest in these narratives. How do you respond to that? Because I think that, I mean, I think that's a ridiculous argument. But anyways, how do you?
It's not a good argument, and I'll tell you why it's not a good argument. for one thing, we have a pattern, and I didn't mention this earlier, but I think it's appropriate to mention it now. If you take any one of these various passages and treat it like a tile in a mosaic, no one tile is going to tell you what the picture is, but when you start laying tile by tile by tile, sooner or later an image emerges, and that's what happens here. We see that there's waves and waves and waves, that they're looking for specific things. And these accounts are not only consistent with each other with regards to the behavior of the Yankees when they came through, but they're also consistent with the other accounts like William Gilmore Simms or Emma LeConte or any number of diaries that are available and are not particularly hard to find. So, my guess is that they don't like what it says. But since this is what they said, unless you have a good reason, I mean, I don't know how they would collude with one another if they're living in different parts of the state. They didn't have Google. They couldn't, go on Google and type up what they were supposed to say, or what would sound good to somebody and what wouldn't sound good to somebody. And even if they had stretched the truth, I don't know if General Lee was as cool as he said he was, but if that geese beat that guy, I'm all for it. But if it was a story, it's a damn good story. It tells you something about him either way.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that story does. Here's a man that didn't like him, right? So why would he make up
I
this
don't like
story?
them. Well,
Why would he make
they're
up the
coming and
story if
taking their
he,
food.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's like someone coming and taking your food. I don't even like when my wife takes my food. I know I wouldn't like an army coming to my house and taking my food.
There was a woman in the area where I live. She died a few years back. She was over 100 years old, and she could remember. She lived in Russell County, Alabama. She could remember in that area when her parents. She was little, but she remembers when the Northern Yankees came through that area and how
Mhm.
everyone was so nervous. They didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't have anything negative to say, but of course
They
they
had
came
no
to her
point of
house and
reference for anything else. They had no other point of reference.
yeah,
I mean, there's no telephones out there. There's no
right.
TVs. There's no smartphones. There's no all these things that people take for granted that with communication was just simply not there. It wasn't
Mhm.
there. So if you can get that many people to get on the same piece of paper and describe the same story in their own voice, then I say that these are good as any other accounts you might find out there. And the perspective is an interesting one to say the least.
Well, I think to your point about a mosaic, and you're looking for sources other than pro-Southern sources, other than the diaries from white Southerners or people that stayed behind,
Right.
because again, you're going to be told that
You're
those
going
are
to be
inaccurate because
told
you're just making it up. But here
they
you have an entirely different group of people that are saying something similar. You can also find this from Northerners. John Muir, of course, who's the founder of Sierra Club, talks about traveling through the South during Reconstruction. He comes across a farm, and the owner of the farm is taking the cotton gin out of the lake because they stuck it in the lake so that they couldn't burn it. Right. So this tells you something. And
yeah,
this is John Muir. This is not some Southerner writing, well, we stuck the cotton gin.
no.
We can't believe that. He's saying, I'm watching them take the cotton gin out of the lake so that they can get this thing working again. Um,
Well, the problem that the experts, as you know, uh, they bless and curse books. So if it's a lost cause mythology book or a neo-Confederate revisionist book or one of these things, nobody has to read it. And if they do read it, you don't have to believe a word of it. So you can't let the record speak for itself. And so, I don't remember the quote, but Clyde used it one time. 40 the testimony of 40,000 people is worthless. Then there is no standard by which to judge truth and falsehood. Uh,
right.
I mean, it's a
It's
fact. It's a fact that it happened. It's a fact that these people lives were turned upside down, and that was before Reconstruction came through and made things even worse.
right. I mean, I think it's an indictment of the historical profession in some ways that these things are so easily and flippantly discounted that it's just, it's no big deal. It didn't happen, or they deserved it. I mean, that's the other, well, these people all deserve it. They're taking the quotes that you gave at the beginning and saying, well, this is all true because all these Carolinians who were now women, children, slaves that were pretty much, I mean, you're talking about young boys and old men that were even left behind to fight in any of these areas, really. And then you have the civilian population, they all deserved it. And so what does that actually say about about the
Well,
historians
they have a
themselves.
vested interest. Okay, so if we find out that Abraham Lincoln's war was illegal, immoral, and all these other things, my life is going to go on, and it's not going to change. I'm going to get up and go to work, and everything's going to be fine. But they're going to have an existential meltdown if they ever have to face that they did not come to do a good thing; they came to do a bad thing, and they left a worse mess behind uh, because they had no plan. Now, why they had no plan, I don't know. They wouldn't let him go out west. West was off limits to freedmen and slaves before the war, and they couldn't go up north because that's where Jim Crow laws were. We didn't adopt Jim Crow laws in the South until the 1890s, if I remember correctly. Uh, and that's when there was a big power shift between the old guard and the new guard. And it's a very interesting topic all by itself. But these people lived together, they worked together. Some of these were probably big plantations, but most folks, did not have big plantations. They had farms, and if they had farms and had a slave family, they lived together and they worked together in the fields. I mean, it's not like there was a separation and they didn't know each other. It's kind of like, me growing up in the 80s. I've never known a life. Uh, I've never lived in a segregated community. I've never been to a segregated school, so I have no point of reference of what such a thing would look like. As a matter of fact, when I go up to like Indiana and there's no black folks there, I feel rather uncomfortable, you know. And when I have relatives come in from out west, they're spellbound by the sheer number. But I said, where do you think you are? I mean, this is where we live, So
Yeah,
they
it's
weren't strangers. They weren't strangers to the Southern folk then. They're not strangers to the Southern folk now. Uh, we may be estranged through political manipulation. Of course, Reconstruction disenfranchised all of the whites and enfranchised the blacks, and it just created a whole lot of problems. And they were used to keep the Republicans in power, much like they have been up until recently, at least, used to keep the Democrats in power. And of course, they use Southern conservatives, whatever that means, to keep the Republicans in power. So we're still the two dogs and the ugly dogs in the pack that are required for political power, but not liked very much.
Yeah, I think that, again, when you look at, again, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them over in the chat or in the Q&A. We got a few minutes. But I think, again, when you look at the depth of these narratives and the humanity of it all, it's easy to have caricatures. It's easy to say, well, again, I'll use Benning. Here's a man that argued was very pro-slavery in all of his speeches. When the war's over, he takes care of 10 former slaves at his own expense because they had nowhere to go at his house. And it shows you that it's a very complex situation. And when Benning died, everyone in Columbus, Georgia, black and white, the whole city, followed his funeral procession down
Sure,
Broadway.
they did.
Ceremony.
Sure,
And
they did.
so you have all of this complexity in the South, and it's something that's very easy to discount because we
Well, I
look at.
mean, I would not be for feudalism. I'm not really for crony capitalism. Slavery's not a great system either, but that's all that anyone knew down south. There was some manufacturing, but not much. And it was agriculture. That's what it should be now. But they keep wanting to bring other people in to give us some great jobs with great benefits, and then lay us off when all the tax goodies are gone.
Now, I'll just ask you a couple questions again of the stuff outside because you've looked at it and you said there wasn't a lot of Georgia. Did you read any of the narratives on the topic, say from Alabama or Virginia or?
No, I think there's plenty there. I think there's, depending on what you're looking, there's plenty of stuff there. I don't know how much. I haven't gone through meticulously through those because it was just not in my will. It wasn't in my scope. But I would recommend them to anyone. They're easy to find on the internet. Just type it in, slave narratives, and I know there's at least two websites that have it. If you have a ebook reader or a Kindle, you can download them from Gutenberg. They have them, and but I haven't really delved much into the other states, although it would probably be worth doing at some point, if for no other reason, to make it readable to future generations, because it's just not going to be readable in another generation. It's just not
Yeah,
going
you're
to be,
talking about because of the dialect. It's
because it's written in dialect,
right.
right? And
Which was
if you don't read it out loud and know what it's, know the lingo, which comes from growing up down here, uh, you're not going to be able to read it. You're not going to be able to read it.
yeah, that was actually a very popular thing to do in the early 20th century, more
Yeah, I've
to
been reading a
write.
lot of old Southern literature, and it was an art form. They didn't just do the dialect of Black folks, but also different people from different places that might show up in the story. They kept their accents, and it's a very interesting thing. Uh, but since there's not real, I mean, I don't know how good it would work. Well, I've got a friend who recently did a book of short stories, Randy Ivy, and he's got some dialect in it, and it works pretty good. Um, but it's like
Yeah,
Union County dialect.
yeah. Randy writes for the website every now and then, and he's
Yeah,
a
he's good. He's good.
yeah.
I like his stories.
Got a question. The best book to read on American slavery. I mean, I can answer that, or if you want to answer that. Um,
Tom on Cross. What
yeah,
do you
Fogel and
say?
Eggerman's very good. It's a different look. I'll give you two different perspectives. Time on the Cross with Fogel and Eggerman, and then also Roll Jordan Roll with Eugene Genovese. They're coming from two
Yeah,
different perspectives. Time on the Cross will make you believe that slavery in the American South was an ultra-capitalist system. That the profit motive. I mean, they look at it from that way. Whereas Genovese focuses entirely on paternalism, which is essentially what we're kind of talking about here with Benning, and
yes,
then how people reacted to. Because there was another question about, well, why would I mean slaves are defending the property of the place where they are? Well, because of Genovese would say that's logical because of a paternalistic system. So
yeah.
he's critical of it, but he says this is, and he actually wrote the last book he ever wrote was on paternalism. So um, but two different ways of looking at this. I think Genovese's book is better because it's focused more on culture and what
I would,
life.
yeah. If you're wanting to look at something that's going to give you a broader perspective of the actual institution and not just some of the other more economic stuff, that would be a better book for you, certainly.
Yeah, Fogel and Engerman, they were not sympathetic to the South. Neither was Genovese
No,
who wrote Roll Jordan Roll. In
no.
fact, they're very critical of the institution of slavery, and but they say, well, and if you look at interviews, even till the day they died, they'll say, well, look, as a comparative labor system, there's a lot of things going on here that make people uncomfortable. And so that book, I mean, if you go back to when it was written in the 70s, they were raked over the coals for this thing because people didn't want to hear some of the economic data that they presented. And then also with Genovese, who later became, very sympathetic with the South. But when he wrote Roll Jordan Roll, he is a New York Marxist. I mean, this is what he
Yes,
was, and he came to admire the Southern tradition as being something valuable in life, that there was something there to it, something real and tangible in American society. And so, anything by Genovese and his wife, Elizabeth
yeah.
Fox Genovese, is
He's
very
got a
good.
collection of essays that he gave at where Harvard or somewhere like that, and
Yeah,
those are really worth looking at.
The Southern Tradition is the title of that book.
Yeah, it's very much worth looking at. It's a very surprising sort of metamorphosis of a Marxist, but
Yeah,
we all
and
come from somewhere.
there's also a little book written by Mark Smith at South Carolina. It's called Debating Slavery. It's a tiny little book, but he goes through all of the different historiographic arguments around it. And he does it in a very small little volume. And if you want to get all of the different arguments, and he just lays them out there, this is what this historian said, this is what this said, this is what the data shows, this kind of thing. It's very good. Debating Slavery by Mark Smith. It's good, and I recommend that as well. So this is a huge topic, and I mean, I think
It's a
again
huge topic.
to
It's
show there's complexity is the part that people don't want to really wrap their heads around, because that would make the very simplistic narrative seem to be it challenges it. And if you have the simplistic narrative, as you said, if you just wake up for you and I, okay, well, yeah, these things happen. But for a lot of people, they bank their entire career or their existence on these things and their simplistic narrative. It's damaging.
I
And
also blame it on the Gettysburg Address, but I blame everything on the Gettysburg Address.
well, sure. I mean but that's a nice example of, as Gary Will said, that revolutionized the revolution. And so, if you're going to do that, I mean, then all of this has to matter. I'm giving a talk at Mises Institute in May,
All
and
right.
I'm going to show an image by Thomas Nast of he painted after the war, and it shows these Union soldiers as knights going on crusade. And you have
Mhm.
this is the image. They're going on crusade into the South, and so if that's the worldview, this righteous cause, well, then it has to work. And if things like your book challenge that, now, as you said, well, there's good accounts in here where Northern Union soldiers came through and did nice
Well, they
things for.
shouldn't have been here in the first place. They shouldn't have
Right,
been
but I
here in the
mean,
first place.
there's complexity to all of this, and I think that's the challenge in creating this narrative. And these little stories, I mean, they're hilarious. Some of them very tragic. And the goose
Mhm.
story is General Lee story is just absolutely
That's
hilarious.
that's you can't hardly beat that.
And the bees stirring up the bees.
The
That's great.
bees, you can't hardly beat that either.
I mean, it's great stuff. It shows you all the humanity of these things. And they thought this was funny. This look what we did to
Yeah.
these little lion thieving
Well,
Yankees.
when they said their household, they meant everybody. Just
Yeah,
like in Abraham, when he took his household out of Ur, that meant everybody,
yeah.
servants, wives, concubines, whatever he had going on back then. The household, he was the head of the household, and they all went with him. So it was a paternalistic system. Uh, these narratives were written 88 years ago. That's it, 88 years ago.
Mhm.
88 years ago. So, if I'm writing in my diary today and you know how to read cursive, particularly bad cursive, you could pick it up in 88 years and it would say the same thing and it would be just as true as when I wrote it the day I did. It's only 88 years. And even if it was 188 years, you'd still be able to read it, you
Mhm.
know, if you can get through my handwriting. But, that's a different
Yeah.
topic.
I mean, it offers a rich part of Southern history that is often overlooked. I know there was some work on the narratives. There was actually some actors that went and read some of the slave narratives. This was about 20 years ago. And they did it for, I think it was PBS or something, but I don't think they read this part of it. They did things that
No,
would
if you
fit
want
an
to, if you
agenda.
want to cherry pick, I mean, I just did a topic, so I pulled everything out, and the picture paints itself. And the good things that are said about the Yankees are far and few between. Now, if they did that because the white folks were interviewing them, I have a very hard time believing that because I've I've been around my whole life and I just can't see it happening. But I don't know.
Well,
I
it's
don't know.
almost like, again, remember, historians say that Southerners lie. It's almost like they're saying these people are lying. They can't be telling.
That's not nice to talk bad about the people that they claim that we you
Well,
know
they can't. Nobody can tell the truth, and no Southerner, doesn't matter who they are, can tell the truth about this. It has
yeah
to be. So,
and that's a problem that's not going to go away anytime soon. You know, the reconciliation is apparently over. I guess the war's back on. I don't know what that means just yet, but when the reconciliation monument comes down, I assume that means the war's back on. They say, why you guys always talk about the war? I said, because you all keep attacking us.
well, this has been a lot of fun, and we're up against the time. So, thank you, Paul, for coming out, and
Thanks
thanks
for
everyone
having me.
for coming out to this and watching it. So, we appreciate it. We'll probably be back in April. I don't know what we're going to do in April, but we'll do something. So, and again, keep an eye out on your email for that, and we appreciate your time. And everyone, have a good evening.
Peace out.